All right, here we go. Hey, YouTube. It's Richard Quiner. I'm back again with another episode of Game Master Craft here on the RPG Daily. First, I've got to thank you for showing up on your weekend, giving us a little bit of time to discuss Dungeons and Dragons with you all. Today is an interesting guest. I've been talking to him a little bit beforehand, and I already know how this interview is going to go. We have a guest, Joshua Blake from npcvoices on Instagram. He's a voice actor, dungeon master, and all of his peers have said, and I quote, he is the most passionate dungeon master ever. And so we're going to figure that out in today's episode. All right, Josh, welcome to the show. Thank you for taking the time today to come out and talk with us and have this interview. We appreciate it. Before we dive into everything, why don't you tell the viewers what is it you do? And we'll start with that. What do you do?
Hello. Yes, my name is Joshua Blake. I am a voice actor. I am a DM. I am an axe coach. Thank you.
Wait, axe coach?
Yeah. When I'm not after the plague is over, I was an axe coach before the plague.
So you teach people how to axe?
Yeah. They can ask me any questions. They won't be splitting any hairs.
Oh,
I'd rather they would than they wouldn't.
oh, jeez.
I can handle any of it.
I just walked into that. I should have seen that one, that setup a mile away, and I just walked into it. Half of my friends do that kind of jokes, and there I was, I didn't check for traps. That was my problem. Well, thank you for coming on the show. We've got a lot of questions. I'm going to ask you a lot of questions about voice acting and character voices and stuff, because that's something I know a lot of dungeon masters struggle with. Even just the idea of having to do voices can be kind of difficult for a lot of DMs. But before we do that, I want to know, how did you get into playing Dungeons and Dragons, and when did you make that transition into being a dungeon master?
Wow. So, okay, how much time do we have?
We got all the time.
Oh man. I was first kind of introduced to Dungeons and Dragons when I was young, like real young.
Okay.
Uh, After someone else asked me this question, I realized I answered it wrongly because my brother and my cousins played D&D, or they tried out D&D, like second edition, I think,
Mm-hmm.
third edition. I can't remember which was out at the time, but I was real young, and I was like, "What's that?" They're like, "We're rolling dice," and I was like, "Okay, I'm sorry, we just had another 12th character die." Um, but after that, I was like, I don't really know what it was. I heard about D&D growing up. I was a huge nerd. I loved everything. And I was like, man, I'm nerdy, but not nerdy enough to play D&D yet. And I've said that all my life and made
Mm-hmm.
jokes about it. And then my junior year of high school, I actually was in a show called She Kills Monsters, and it's all about D&D.
Yeah, I'm
It
familiar with that.
it's awesome. Like, I love it. I played Orcus in it,
Okay.
which Orcus in D&D lore is my absolute hands down favorite creature, entity, whatever. But in the show, very not the same Orcus.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in that, and our very first rehearsal was us sitting down, pulling out the 5e player handbook, and making characters. Not the characters we were playing, just making a
Just
D&D group of characters.
all right.
And, and it was awesome. Like, from that point on, I was hooked. I was like, wait, you can make a character however you want, whatever color. I can have a dragonborn with a tail.
And that's when you discovered you were, in fact, nerdy enough to play Dungeons and Dragons.
That's
All
when
right.
I ascended.
Well, welcome to the better life. Since then after that, when did you start running your own games?
I started running my own games 2 or 3 years after that because I got into D&D. I wasn't I wasn't because there were almost no D&D groups around at that time. It wasn't big. It wasn't anything. I
Mm-hmm.
heard about Critical Role, which I think they were in their first or second year of filming, and I was like, this seems cool. And I was in college at the time, and I binge watched the entire show up until viewing them live. I think on their 40th episode or
Mm-hmm.
50th episode. And I was hooked. I was like, wait, what? This is how it could be, because I've been an actor my entire life.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, this is amazing. And I started DMing for my friends a year after college, like the year of or after college. And so it was probably 2017. I
Okay.
think I started DMing 2018.
Wow. That's not too long ago, actually. That's just right back a couple years ago. Very cool. So, Critical Role obviously has a big influence on that. Did that have anything to do with you trying wanting to be a voice actor as well?
Funny you asked that. Thank you. Yeah, actually, I before that point, I'd been trained in film, stage, and TV show acting. I'd gone through all of that, blah 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 blah. And I was like, okay, cool. I've got to be a face actor, or else I make no money. Blah blah blah. Whatever stage. And then I watched Critical Role, and it opened up my eyes. I was like, wait, voice acting is a thing? Give me
What?
hold the motherfucking phone. You can be a voice actor? And I sat there because I'd always had huge insecurities about me being an actor because
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And I was like, but I could stand in front of a mic and just speak and just become a character and just live through. And I realized I was like, cartoons I've watched, movies I've watched, commercials, radio station. I'm like, how have I never thought of this? And I felt like such a dunce up until that point. And I was like, this is amazing. So from that point on, I worked on voices, accents,
Mm-hmm.
trying to build more into that whole thing. And so I definitely like Critical Role is not who I am, but they've definitely helped create this journey for me that I never thought possible.
That's really cool. I haven't met anyone who decided or looked in who had that sort of uh, that influence from Critical Role in career wise. I know a lot of people get into Dungeons and Dragons because of it. That's just how it works. But then thinking, going and pivoting and being like, voice acting actually sounds really cool because of Critical Role. I've never met someone who's gone down that path. So that's really interesting, and I'm sure that set you up for a lot of questions and a lot of interesting conversations. You mentioned one before we went live about old people. How do I want to hear that again? How do they react when they find out you're a voice actor?
Oh, you're a voice actor. Oh, that's really cool. Do a Bugs Bunny for me.
No, I don't do impersonation. I don't do imitation.
Oh, okay. How about Nixon?
Like, no, I don't do impressions. And
Oh, okay. Just so you're not really a voice actor. You're more of just a free speaker.
and I'm like, oh, woman.
I
I
think you need to
swear.
change your Instagram handle to NPC Free Speaker.
Free speech. That's true. I'm
Just
sorry.
change
I've
it.
misled
You
everyone.
clearly did not
This is my
understand the
apology
way.
video.
You need a dramatic sigh, and you need a dog running around to really get people in on the apology video train. Uh, Building off that, though, like I said, voice acting and creating voices for NPCs and for characters in general is a thing a lot of dungeon masters kind of aspire to do. I personally kind of gave up a little bit. My players will all agree. Most of my voices sound the same. I have I have bad Christopher Walken and Grumpy Sailor are like my two voices, and that's it. And every character sounds like that. Even like the princess is Grumpy Sailor. So when you are coming up with voices for your NPCs or just your NPCs in general, when does the voice actually come into play for you?
So for me, I build it with the posture, if that makes sense. So if I'm going to be, let's say, an old hag, a green hag, you come
Mm-hmm.
into her like hut and she's got a hunch to her. Her arms are more bird-like, pulling in like wings, almost raptor-ish. Long bony fingers.
she's going to curl around, and her voice is going to move with her body as well.
She'll snap and do quick movements. And it'll be either, and I usually try and follow them around a creature or a person that I know, because it's much easier to, once again, imitations versus just creation. But usually I build the posture, I show off the character what they're like. Over online games, it's a lot harder to do this, which is why I love it in games, but you get to see the assistant that comes up to help you. The name's Igor. Nice to see you. With the body and with it, and just kind of from that character comes a new entity. Thank you.
So you bring a lot of the body motions into it and the body language, I guess, coming into your NPCs at the table that you're building, which then also leads you to the voices. Am I right?
Yes,
or am
sir.
I off on that one? Okay.
No, completely.
Interesting. So, talking about voices is cool. Voicing is really neat and fun, but I want to get into the other side of dungeon mastering. There's a lot you have to do in building stories, dealing with your players and their interactions. What are your current gaming? What are your current games like? Like, are you doing homebrew? Are you running modules? And what is your biggest challenge right now as a game master?
So to answer the first question, I have never run a module. I
Okay.
can't. I'm not someone, like, I am a perfectionist. And so if it
Mhm.
came to me running someone else's module or someone else's game, it would take me weeks, months, maybe even a year of preparation. If it's something like Tomb of Annihilation or something,
Mhm.
I would want to know every single person, every route, everything, and have it all memorized before even going into the game, because I always worry about off tracking and then trying to pull the characters back on track. And I'm someone that, like, I'd take a module, like I took Storm King's Thunder, and
Mhm.
I homebrew kept it and went from there, where if they went off track, they went off track, but I had a pretty easy way to build them into the world and then back into the storyline.
Okay.
And then the second
Yeah.
question.
What is your greatest challenge right now as a game master?
My biggest challenge right now, especially right now in the plague apocalypse of toilet paper loss, is
Toilet paper. You're running out of
it's
toilet
toilet
paper.
paper. That's, as a dungeon master, it's the hardest thing. It's 2-ply, 3-ply, you're not sure.
Yeah.
No, the hardest thing for me right now is writing. Like, I'll get on a kick and, like, write down, finish a one shot, 2 1-shots, and be like, yes, I have these. These are going nowhere. And I'll, like, just sit here and be like, crap, what now? And also reaching my players. Like, I am just such an emotional and ethos DM
Mm-hmm.
that I want to reach my players. I want to be sitting at a table with them and pulling them in and looking at them with their consent, of course, grabbing their shoulders and working with them in this example.
Mm-hmm.
But I can't. And that connection is just completely cut for me. And trying to get that same pull and everything is so hard to do through a screen.
That's true, and I think, is a challenge a lot of people are running into right now. Um, with online gaming, it's nice. We have a lot of tools, but it's just not quite the same. Have you been running any games since the apocalypse started?
Yes, since the beginning, first flare of the apocalypse, I have run 3 sessions with a campaign that's kind of up and down right now.
Okay.
A 2 or 3 or 4 1-shots, 2 of them for Lady Tiefling, 2 of them just for funsies. And then I plan to run another 2 to 5 games in the next little bit.
Okay. So you're keeping running the games, and you're finding you're running into this challenge of not being able to connect with your players as much. What are you doing to help with that? Or do you have any tricks that you're trying out to reach your players a little better? That kind of stuff is what I'm looking for.
Funny you ask, because yes, I do.
Excellent. I wasn't going for funny, but I'll take it.
But
Tips.
the tricks that I have is, one, the biggest thing is using a character's name, because so often your other players will use the real person's name, and it sometimes can break a scene. And so trying to stay with the person's name, and like, let's say your name is Zariel, the angel, great. It's like, Zariel, I need you. We've been traveling for 4 months and we've had no help. Zariel, please, I need you. And it's using that repeat of the name can really pull the player in from like being on their phone or looking at the computer writing down nopes. Notes. Nopes.
It's the apocalypse.
It's the apocalypse.
We write nopes.
That'll be a nope today.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just trying to pull them in, but with using their character name, or even calling out to them and being more specific about what they see, being more specific about how you are looking at them. He looks at you sorrowfully, begging in his eyes. Oh man, grammar.
I'm not a judge. I don't know it. So using a lot of their names, repetition to bring them in, that is a really good piece of advice. I know we always, or a lot of people do say, call your players by their character names when you're at the table, but I've never thought of that. Like the repetition of the name could bring them in a little, draw their attention into the game even more than calling them by the name once. So I like that. I like that idea. And you've seen that work pretty well for you thus far?
Yeah, very, very well.
Excellent. What tools are you using right now to run your games?
Dice,
Okay.
markers, a camera. We've got a headset.
I don't believe you about the dice. I don't think that's necessary.
No.
But more like, are you using Roll20? Do you do video chat like Zoom, or what is that kind of toolbox, I should say?
Oh, okay. Gosh, sorry. Just so confused.
No, I knew what I was getting into.
Oh, I'm an a-hole. I'm sorry.
It's cool.
So the different tools that I use is I've used Roll20 twice. Sorry to Roll20. I don't really like it that much. I legitimately, if I could flip the full camera around, you could see that I have a full battle map behind here that I flip the camera I'm using around right now and do an overlay of it. And so I have just tons of minis that is wasted in this apocalypse if I'm not able to put them on a battle map.
Right.
But I use that mainly, and then I use Discord for campaigns if it's not going to be streamed, and Zoom if it is, or Vorpal board. I'm using Vorpal board right now, or part of Vorpal board in a Monday night stream called Ukador Origins, or Origins of Ukador.
Ah, you're part of that one as well.
Yeah, them peoples.
No, I have Chris coming on next week, so.
Oh, cool.
And getting all the details on that one later. Vorpal board I've seen and used twice now. It's pretty good software. I'm digging it. It's straightforward, easy to use, not a lot of bells and whistles, which is great. So that's pretty cool. But you use a physical. You like to stick with the physical things instead of going to the digital software, which I'm finding a lot of people are enjoying that still. The physical models and the minis and terrain. Very cool. Very cool. I want to move away from that. I want to get into your writing and story making process. When you are coming up with a one-shot, where do you get the most inspiration for them?
Well, other than my friends and family, the inspiration comes from in here. Thank you.
All right, next question.
No, so the inspiration for me, I usually, and as weird as it is, I usually will start with a creature, a base creature that's going to be your boss monster.
Okay.
And then I shape it around that. I'm like, okay, why is this creature here? Why is this doing what it is? Like this last game is a Hydra. Why is the Hydra there? What is it doing? It's linked to a woman, so their souls are shared. She cannot die. If it does not die, it does not die if she does not die along with it. So how can I bridge the gap here? Why would the characters care about this? So it's trying to build in, for one, the biggest thing in one shots I feel is empathy. Trying to build empathy or sympathy for a storyline is the hardest thing as a DM in one shots. Because like, well, this is over in 4 hours for us, 4 or 5, 6 hours for us. So how do we trust an NPC that's at the table that's not at the table?
Yeah.
And I build around that. I'm like, okay, now where do they reside? Okay, in a dungeon, or how about in the keep? A keep protected by gargoyles. And a nearby town has been ransacked because the Hydra went wild. And like building from there, like going outward, building that world. Okay, there's the boss room. Now, where's the boss room located? The keep. Where's the keep located? On the island of Volcora, near here, here, and here. And just going from there, and then you can build from there. You can build the NPCs dropped in. You can drop in the helpers to the quest.
Yeah.
It's a lot like a ripple effect. You drop one and it goes out.
That is, and I hear that a lot. It's interesting to me that you start with kind of the big bad or kind of the boss. That's kind of an interesting way to do it. That is a really good storytelling method, is, start with the end and then work your way backwards and fill in the gaps. I want to focus on what you said about empathy and getting your characters into an emotional connection with your story. Do you have any tips for people who are struggling with that, especially in one-shots? Like, that's the most difficult because the players know they're only there for that 3 to 4 hour time, and then they're gone. What are your tips for people who might have a hard time doing that, getting the players invested?
So, my biggest thing is, for one, finding out what people's triggers are, individual by player, so that you do not step on any toes or cause any over problems. The next is finding what else people are okay with, are okay hearing about, listening to, talking about. And this is where, once you learn all that, you bring in a person's empathy. Because unless you are a Critical Role, unless you are able to fully dive into this character and not have any other sympathy, any other anything from your personal being, then you can work with that. But as a DM, I know a lot of the people that are coming to my table are pretending to be these characters, are going through it. So you sometimes have to pull a bit of the actual person's empathy and sympathy and a bit of the character's empathy and sympathy. So let's say my thing that I did was that, and I'll do the super short, sorry, I'll try not to rant.
No, it's all good.
But we had an instance in one of my games. I've never had my players go off the rails in any of my games. Because usually I can build an empathy or sympathy for the storyline that they're like, yeah, this makes sense to go along with. I'm not railroading. I give them options and everything. And if they go off the rails, then I make sure the rails follow along with the path they want. But this is the one time that one of them checked a room for detect magic, or with detect magic, and they found a magical drawer. And they're like, well, we try and open it. Well, after 20,000 attempts of trying to open it, not going right, and then the mayor who this office belonged to was downstairs seeing his friend who had just jumped out a window to try and save some belongings that were being stolen. He's talking with his pretty much almost dying friend who fell 3 stories. This other half of the party is up there trying to get this unlocked, and they finally just give up and throw the full desk out the window. And at this point, I'm frustrated because we are going on hour 5 of a one-shot that should not take anywhere near this long.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, here we go. And so the desk hits the ground, and one person rolls like a 20 or 30 something on perception from the 3rd story looking down at what it is. I'm like, it was a locked drawer, magical, because it has legal deeds and documents, a big bag of emergency gold, and a stuffed bunny. And people are like, what the heck? And you see the drow mayor look down and see what is just shattered next to him, look up, and absolute rage is in his eyes, and he runs back up these 3 stories. He tears off his belt, and Drider legs explode from his lower half, and he runs at them, dealing like 40 damage in one round to multiple people just cleaving through each of them.
Mm-hmm.
And then he stops mid-swing and just drops his blade and just crumples to the floor sobbing. And he speaks about how that bunny belonged to his daughter. How that was all he could take with him escaping the Underdark cities, because Driders are looked down on. And for your husband, your father, to be turned into a Drider, you were run out of town or you were turned into slaves. One of the two. And so his wife was killed. And then by the time he got to the edge of his town, he was being stoned. And he looks down at his daughter, and his daughter's barely hanging on because the rocks have been hitting both of them, and she dies. And my paired characters, I have one of them crying at the table, one of them tearing up, and the rest of them just silent. And it wasn't me being like, yeah, got back at you, mother effers. Mm-hmm. But it was something that not only made a point, it brought reality to the table, but also humanity to the table. It's like, this isn't just an NPC. This isn't someone that's just a 2D character. This is someone that has had a life before this point.
Mm-hmm.
And you were inhumane to them and their possessions. Understand the consequences of your actions. And yeah, sorry, that was a rant, but
no, that was great. That's a great illustrative point that you were making, though, even about bringing that into one shot like that, answering the question, but that also built on the concept of really fleshing out NPCs. Now, going back to that, did you come up with his backstory beforehand, or was that something you made up on the fly? Exactly. Which, that's perfectly fine, and that's a great way to do it. I really like that idea that you took the time, or even in the moment were able to think far enough and come up with basically his entire life story in that instant when you didn't know what the players were going to do. You didn't know they were going to throw that thing out the window. You might have known that, but then you were able to turn that in that instant to create something, which tells me that's something you think about a lot, is the humanity of your NPCs, because you don't just come up with that. That's kind of a creative muscle that's got to be worked at, in my opinion, right? So going off of that, what is your, aside from the voices and the motions, what is the next most important thing that an NPC needs to be really memorable?
You said other than the voices and the motion of them?
Yeah, the physical side. What is the more story side of an NPC that you need?
This is going to be the most general and stupid answer, but them. They are themselves. They are not, like you said, you do the same voice as the princess that you do the sailor.
Yeah.
But even though, and that's what doesn't matter. Voices do not matter.
Mm-hmm.
The point that they are two different people, just because they sound the same, they are them. And that's something that's sometimes hard to convey. But that sailor, he may have the same voice, but she might have something wrong with her throat that day. Don't call her out like that. But just because they sound the same doesn't mean their backstories are anything similar.
Mm-hmm.
She may have a grieving father that lost his husband 20 years before, and he has never grown close to another male figure in his entire life, and only keeps a harem or a council of women, and people think of him as this horrible idolatrous individual, when really he feels so uncomfortable inside about himself for losing his husband that he could never grow near to another individual again. So his eldest son is pushed away, and only his daughters will gain the throne because he only allows it to them.
All right. Yeah, it is a generic answer, but it's also very it's kind of a thought-provoking answer as well, and thinking about it. And truly, NPCs have their own lives. They are individuals, which sometimes that's forgotten at the table. And so I think that's a perfectly valid answer. Even if you thought it might have been basic, it was less basic than I thought. I do have a question in the chat that I wanted to get to before we get into the end question start of things. A viewer is asking, how many encounters do you create for your players during a one-shot?
Okay, so I'll go with the most recent one that I did, not just now. I did a one shot, a Disney one shot,
Okay.
and I created, so not for them to do, but I created around 10 to 15 encounters in that one shot because I wanted to not make them feel like they were being railroaded.
Okay.
But if you do not have quarantine and plague hours on you, I recommend creating 3 to 5. 3 main ones.
Mhm.
3 main encounters, your beginning, middle, and end. Now, those other 2 can go in between those.
Mhm.
Let's say that first section, like you meet in a tavern. They have a great time in the tavern. That first beginning part, they have a great time. They're learning each other, or they're getting to know each other. They're getting to know more all information and investigating more. So they're actually progressing into more of the middle part, but they're still in the first encounter.
Mhm.
So you can just skip that technically 1A encounter and go straight to 2 or even to 2A encounter.
Mhm.
Now, let's say that they're going super fast and they're just knocking out all this. You go beginning, you go 1A, that little in the middle, either puzzle or combat scene or interaction, that will help push them on to 2. And then from there, 2A or straight to 3, depending on the speed that they're going.
Mhm. So it's kind of a mix of full, longer encounters, more important, and lesser bridge kind of segue encounters, we could call them, that push the players from one to another in case they don't pick the path that might be most efficient. That's an interesting way to look at it. I've always thought of it as, 3 to 5 is always, that's what I learned from Matt Colville. That's what I try to do myself. I haven't thought so much about the smaller encounters because you may have just answered my question of how to run a one-shot without railroading the players, because that's something I struggle with a lot, because a one-shot to me is always very structured and like go, go, go. But giving those like nice little encounters might give them a little more feeling of, agency and choice. I like that. I'm stealing it. That's going to be my whole thing on this show, is I'm just going to be like, I'm stealing that idea because I'm stealing everything from everyone once this quarantine is over and I can get back to running games more efficiently. Another question I have for you, what is your favorite part of running games?
To be honest with you, it's the players. So truly, and this is going to sound like such an asshole thing to say, but I am just such a giver. I just love giving, and I do. Like, I'll be at the table, and my favorite thing is at a convention, at the dining room table, where you go and you're setting the scene.
Mm-hmm.
You're creating the pillars. Like on my Wednesdays, I do Where Am I Wednesday. It's, you look at the pillars, the vines curl up around them, and the blocks ahead of you are crumbling beneath your feet, but you continue moving forward. And sometimes I'll stop and take a breath, as if like I'm about to say something big and profound, but instead, I just look around the table. And I'm getting chills. I'm getting chills right now. But they're gone. These characters are not at the table. They're not sitting there as people. They're inside this world that you are creating.
Mm-hmm.
You are setting the scene, and these 5, 6 people, 8 people, 20 people that are sitting at your table are there for you in this storyline because they feel like you have something to offer them that'll be fun, and that they'll be willing to take time out of this crazy world where everyone's always go, 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 to sit down for 2 to 4 freaking hours to play a game. That is amazing to me. Like, I am blown away. I love it. Like, I love the looks and the excitement that players get when they finish a session or a one-shot. That is my favorite.
Nice. That is, thinking about that is kind of an impressive feat. Especially since the game, from the player's perspective, is a lot of losing. There's a lot of failure and not having the most, best dice rolls. So them coming back, that's really something, special, I guess. So I can appreciate that mindset, even if I hadn't thought of it myself. I'm gonna appreciate that. We do have another question in the chat that I wanted to bring up. Do you find that DMing helps you be a better writer, or even opens the creativity to come up with more campaigns or one-shots more easily? Yes, that's the answer. Yes. I'll start on this one, that I definitely agree that is the case, because I think creativity is a lot like a muscle, or it's a lot like a, the more you do it, the more you can do it on a repeated basis. At least that's what I've found out. I don't know your experiences. What do you feel about this? What is something that you've experienced here?
I mean, completely. Like, when you start getting into DMing more, like you already said, like, the first time you DM, at least for me, I wanted to have every inch and piece of dust mapped out. I wanted to make sure that it was all there. Second time I DM'd, it was kind of like that. Third time, it was still pretty much like that. But then you get to a point where you get the bones that you're writing, and the more you get into it, you're like, well, oh my gosh, that bone connects to that bone, and I could write that in. And then once I write that, that can connect to that, and then your world starts to weave together. But at the same time, you're not building the skin and everything. You're just kind of building the structure of it all, so that your players, they're the ones that make the hair and the skin and the features. You're just building the kind of skeletal world around it, and you get to be so much more creative with what you write because of that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Hopefully that answered the question. I definitely think if anyone struggles to do one-shots, I would say run more one-shots. Just like get out there, run games, think, get in the yes and mindset. I know that's like the most cliche thing to say when it comes to improv, but it's also the most true and the most helpful is when as soon as you say no, everything just grinds to a halt. And it's just stopping everything. But if you just say yes, and then you add on to it, it's amazing. And then your brain opens up, and then the creativity just pours out into the world. And it's good stuff. You've answered all my questions too well and had some very emotional moments. I don't like that. No. Here I'm thinking it's going to be just like a lot of goofy moments, and then you start talking about the players and making me think about that, and I'm like, oh, that's true. And some of my players are in the chat, and I'm just like, go away, guys. I don't want to.
Screw those guys.
Get out of here. Changing subjects a little bit to a little more a lighter, a different generic DM tips. I want to know, what is one tip you would give to first-time dungeon masters who are just learning?
Have fun with it. Like, the thing is, if you're going to be, because my first DMing experience was just with a group of friends that were like, I want to learn how D&D does. And I'm like, nope, D&D works. That's how, yep, please, grammar. And it's, if you're going to be sitting down with friends that you're comfortable with, then they're comfortable with you. Sit down, even though, yes, it is a little stressful to create this storyline. Even now, like, I'll DM for my friends for streams and be like, oh, I'm going to mess up, and they're going to hate me, and everything's going to burn. But no, relax. Your friends are there to have a good time with you and for whatever this crazy storyline you're putting together. If you're migrating through a dragon's body like Osmosis Jones and that's the one shot, that's the one shot. It's not like this world is not meant to be set in stone. We are not all rule lawyers on our first DM game. You can be loose with it. You can have a good time. Just breathe life into the game and just have fun with your friends.
Yeah, that's a really good tip. Just have fun. Just have fun, guys. That is really good information. Do you go by Josh or do you go by Joshua? Which is it?
I go by Josh, Joshua, Marshmallow, and Hey You.
Interesting. The marshmallow thing is okay. If that's all right. I feel like there's a lot there, but we won't unpack that one. Josh, thank you so much for chatting with me today. I want you to explain to the audience, where can they find you online? And we've touched a little bit on your Instagram content just briefly, but can you go more in depth of like the stuff you create on there, because it's very unique for the D&D community.
Oh, sure. So when it comes to my experience or content, I I do a lot of voice and creation stuff. So like if you're looking for like an NPC, or you're looking for a setting or something to help spark some creativity in you, come to my page. Like Mondays, I've got Monster Monday, which is kind of like a what's that Pokemon? It's got a riddle. It gives you an idea of what creature it is. It doesn't have an outline because that'd be too easy. But you try and guess what creature it is, and then sometimes you even learn a bit more about the stat blocks that you didn't know before. Tuesdays, I've got my Titan Tuesdays. It's some large creature. I put a small little blurb about them and how much I love that sort of creature. Like, what did I do this last time? A lich. I think of a lich as a Titan of a creature, not a Titan size or a Titan classification. Wednesdays, I've got Where Am I Wednesday, which is the scene setting. If you're like, I don't know where I want this boss fight to be or what to stage this around, look at some of my Where Am I Wednesdays, because I've got different settings that may be like, that'd be really cool for a one-shot or a campaign. Thursdays, I've got random NPCs that you can jump in on and hear accents, and as well as they're just little ticks and weird oddities. Fridays are my friend Fridays, just giving love. And then my Saturdays and Sundays I usually reserve and don't post anything.
All right. So there's a lot of stuff people can find there. That's a good rundown. And that's on Instagram, which the link is in the description of this video. When the stream's over, people go back and watch it and whatnot. It'll be there. And someone in the chat is also saying you also rap on occasion.
Who said that?
Saiyan Underdog.
Oh, mother effer. Say it, I swear. Yes, this most recent Monster Monday and Titan Tuesday, because the Instagram wasn't letting me post on Monday, I did a full-blown lich rap.
Out of frustration of Instagram?
Out of frustration. Like, I was so annoyed. I was like, you know what? I'm not going to do a riddle. I'm going to just do a straight-up lich rap. And someone else could have done it much better.
But you did it first. As far as we know. As far as we know. All right. So make sure you guys go check out Josh's work. It's really some interesting creative stuff. Don't try to, I am going to tell myself to not try and emulate it too much, because I'll probably get an aneurysm. But I think it is some really good inspiration. I do enjoy, because we go there and you see normal D&D pages are like pictures or, just little write-ups. And then I go to yours and you're just like, here's an NPC. And then you are the NPC acting it out and talking and that kind of thing. And it's like, that's different. So I appreciate that, where it's like, oh, cool. And then if I were good at doing impressions, I could try and, imitate that and be like a real voice actor, according to old people, and do my imitations. Anyways, if you guys haven't, go check out Josh's stuff. Thank you for coming to the show today. Tomorrow, I actually don't have a guest tomorrow, but I'm planning on doing a stream just talking about this last week and kind of going over things. So if you're around tomorrow, come watch that stream. And then I have a whole other week of great creators lined up to come talk with. So thank you guys for watching. And, we'll see you next time.
See you guys.